Today's Shabbat HaGadol, and there are a few different explanations for where that name comes from. Shabbat HaGadol, the great Shabbat, or the big Shabbat, depending on how you translate it. And one idea is that it comes from the special Haftorah, right? The word Gadol, this end note that it comes on, that things are going to be big. Another reason offered is that it's actually connected to the rabbi's sermon, the drasha. That before Pesach, the rabbi would give a very big sermon to go over all of the laws of Pesach. It actually says in some of the law codes from the Middle Ages that people wouldn't get home that Shabbat until almost mincha, the afternoon service. It would go very late. And it even in one of them I found that I was coming across, it talks about how they'd get out not just afternoon, but near mincha, with the implication being that most services back then ended well before noon, it seems, which is nice. But this Shabbat I want to think about as we prepare for Pesach. I want to actually focus on our Parshat instead of the upcoming holiday. In Parshat Metzora, it talks about the skin disease, tza'arat. But it's not just a skin disease that people can get. It's something that happens to our objects too. It can appear on the walls of one's house. It can appear on objects in the house. There's something really interesting about it that I think serves as an example of a recent event that happened. I don't know how many people here listen to NPR or read NPR, but there's something really interesting that happened earlier this month. A senior editor, Uri Berliner, who had been with NPR his entire professional life, for 25 years. He's a distinguished journalist, having won many awards. So he truly is an insider within the organization. He published a piece outside of the organization criticizing it for no longer just being a little bit of a liberal tilt in its reporting, but for actively downplaying stories that they thought would hurt Democratic candidates or liberal candidates, for actively chasing stories even if there wasn't necessarily the right amount of proof and evidence that would hurt the opposition, the Republican Party. And when it comes to Israel and Palestinians, promoting one side of the narrative over the other deliberately. And so he wrote this article, and what was interesting about it was that this was not somebody criticizing from the outside, but a true insider, 25 years within the organization. Someone who, when I listened to him in interviews after the article, repeatedly said he doesn't believe in calls for defunding NPR. He's just there because he wants to see NPR get back on track. That he doesn't think it's a big conspiracy, but that it happened enough that they live within their own bubble, that this needed to be said to push them, whether there's a chance for redemption. He was suspended and eventually took the suspension very well, even publicly said that he was okay with it. But it was when he continued to be criticized by the leadership, when it became clear to him that the leadership had no intention of listening at all to his words, he resigned his position. That had me thinking about in our Parsha, the tza'arat that appears on the walls of one's house. First it appears, the Kohen comes, they do a purification ritual, and they let the house sit for a week. The Kohen, the priest, comes back, and if it appears again, or it gets bigger, if it spreads more, they start to do some serious work to address this problem. They remove the mortar, they remove the stones that are afflicted of the walls, they place new stones in, they take the other ones and they put them outside the camp in an area where it's contaminated things, it's quarantined. And a week goes by, and if they come back, and even after having removed the stones that were had this illness, this affliction, it reappears. The house must be demolished. It's an interesting lesson. We often like to imagine that things can be fixed, things can be repaired. But sometimes there's a point where something goes so far in one direction that it can't be fixed. I think that's what Uri saw with NPR. After his article and the reaction to it, it became clear that despite his hopes that NPR could return to unbiased journalism, maybe with a slight liberal bent, but could give people the news with honesty and integrity, facts without just opinion, he said it can't be done anymore. He gave it a shot. He tried. But there's a point where the house can't be saved. It has to be demolished. I think the lesson can apply to many different things. In our personal lives, there are relationships we may try to fix. And sometimes it's true, it's sad, but there are relationships that can't be repaired. And when someone repeatedly hurts us again and again and again with no showing of remorse or ability to change, there comes a time, not out of anger or spite, but to preserve the rest of something, we have to say enough is enough. And I think we're seeing that now with many organizations. When we want to change them, when it comes to their views, their policies, their stated opinions when it comes to what's going on in Israel. Places where we think, okay, they said something that was anti-Semitic, that was accidental. We can teach them, we can educate them. We can stay there, we can be a part of the corporation, the structure to help change it from the inside. I think we're seeing now in the world today that there's a point where we can't do that anymore. Like donors that took their money out of university campuses who refused to protect students from blatant anti-Semitic attacks. There's a point where we have to say enough is enough. We can't change something from within. We have to start anew. Parshat Metzora, the rabbis say, gets its name, this disease, Metzora. It's a Hebrew acronym for Motzei Shem Ra, talking about the laws of gossip, that it afflicts somebody who uses words to hurt people, who speak negatively about others, participate in acts of slander and libel and gossip. I think it's interesting when we talk about, again, these organizations promote this worldview that isn't just what they sometimes couch it as, about wanting peace, wanting to help, wanting to save the innocent. Because we all want that. I don't know a single Jew, no matter where they are in the political spectrum, who doesn't want peace in Israel. I don't know a single Jew, no matter where they are in the political spectrum, who doesn't think that it's awful when civilians and innocent people die. But too many use that rhetoric to hide their true feelings, their true views. Too many use that rhetoric to hide what really is, just below the surface, anti-Semitism. And we see it again and again simmering to the top. I can't tell you how many university students I've spoken to in the last few months. I don't know a single one who hasn't had some personal experience of a friend, someone in their class, a professor, an administrator, somebody saying something that really was outright anti-Semitic. And it's our news organizations and our political leaders who I think are doing the most damage, creating an environment where that's okay, creating a culture and a society where that's okay. Now, most of us can't resign from these news organizations like Uri did. But perhaps in our own lives, there's a way of saying enough is enough. We're not going to let these organizations continue or we're not going to support them. We're not going to give our money to them. We're not going to give our time to them. They cannot be repaired. Change needs to happen. This Shabbat, as we prepare ourselves for Pesach, I invite you to think about in your own life, your own organizations, your relationships, your circles. What influence do you have that you can use? Because the truth is, each and every one of us has to use whatever influence we can, because none of us can change it all. Shabbat Shalom.